Welcome to Disrupting Japan, straight talk from Japan's most successful entrepreneurs. I'm Tim Romero, and thanks for joining me. Today, I'm bringing you a live show that we did at CEATEC, which is kind of Japan's version of America's CES show. We worked with Plug and Play Japan to set up an event where we could bring two hardware innovators on stage, and we had an in-depth discussion of what it takes to be a hardware startup in a world where venture capital seems fixated on SaaS companies and software platforms. Now, in the show, I introduced both of my guests, and if you were at CEATEC, you would have seen their company booths and understood what they're all about. But since you probably weren't at CEATEC this year, I'll explain a bit about the companies our guests run. Tomo runs Aquabit Spirals, and they use NFC chips that can be embedded in, well, just about anything, that allow mobile phones to interact directly with signs, buildings, or any physical object, really. And Keith runs Crown Digital, which makes robot baristas. It's a robot that brews and serves up coffee. Okay. So at first glance, it seems that Tomo and Keith are running two very different companies. But you'll see that many of their core experiences are very similar. Oh, and by the way, I was recovering from a bad cold on this day, so the first few minutes of the interview, my voice is squeaky to the point of sounding a bit like Mickey Mouse. But if you suffer through those first few minutes, as I certainly did, it all stabilizes. And we have a great conversation. Both Tomo and Keith have some great advice about raising money as a hardware startup and how to give large companies confidence that your product will meet their quality standards. And they share some pretty surprising answers to my questions about the best way to go global. But you know, Tomo and Keith tell that story much better than I can. So let's get right to the interview. Listen, I want to thank you all. We're going to have the music fade out. Excellent. So listen, today we're going to be talking about business-to-business sales for hardware startups. And before I do that, let me introduce myself and our panelists. So my name is Tim Romero. I run a podcast and startup community called Disrupting Japan, where we interview Japanese startup founders in English, which means there's alcohol involved in quite a lot of these conversations, some more than others. We have. But we talk not so much about the specific companies, but the broader lessons to be learned. It's really startup founders helping each other, and that's what we're going to do today. Hopefully, the three of us anyway are going to learn something, and hopefully you will too. So first, let me introduce Keith Tan. He's a wealth manager and coffee enthusiast who turned entrepreneur. Now, Keith's passion for customer experience started the Crown Coffee journey in 2016, and his love for technology drove him to open a smart cafe where everything is connected, integrated, and digitalized, with the exception of the coffee, I assume.
Coffee stays the same. It's
coffee
old
is
school.
still analog.
Analog, yeah.
All right. So Keith tells me he envisions a world where robotics, artificial intelligence, and data analytics combine to solve real-world pain points in traditional businesses, and along the way, plans to put a great cup of coffee in everyone's hand. With Ella, a robotic coffee barista, Crown Digital's solution they say will disrupt and revolutionize the way that food and drinks are served in this world. And in the center, we have Tomo Hagiwara, who started his business career at Recruit after graduating from Waseda. So he didn't stay there long. He started his first startup here in Japan, creating websites back in '95. And then after 20 years in the internet industry, he left software and jumped over the wall onto the hardware side, founded Aquabit Spirals to create value by connecting the physical and digital world. And he's been working on developing near-field communication since 2011. So Aquabit Spirals provides IC chips that can be embedded into small devices and let mobile devices interact directly with physical objects. The company's mission is to create a culture of tap and connect. And I really wanted
but
to do...
Tim, are you okay? But I'm anxious about your voice condition.
We're going to get through it.
You should take a water
Yeah.
at the beginning.
Well, hopefully you guys are going to be doing most of the talking. So let's talk about B2B hardware sales, because enterprise hardware sales really is fundamentally different from both consumer hardware sales and from business-to-business software sales. So I'm curious, in both of your cases, what's been your strategy to kind of get past this gee whiz attitude and to actually get to the people who can make a decision to buy your products? Keith, do you want to start us off?
So we created Ella. She's a robotic barista serving coffee. So that's something quite new. And, first of all, we did a lot of road shows, a lot of events, a lot of exhibitions. And that got a lot of attention from the larger corporates. I think the sales process is quite long, especially B2B. And when the checkbook is he's got to be a big one.
So what's been, to dig into that a little bit, so what's been your experience? I mean, how do you move from the, wow, that's a cool robot, to we'd like to give you this $500,000 contract to install these baristas in our location?
First of all, you really need to understand their pain points. What are you solving for them? You need to give them bullets to sort of tick. That solves my problem. Okay, let's find the fund to support that. And really, it's a long process for them because there are many stakeholders as well.
So what's the biggest pain point you're solving?
First of all, it's definitely manpower, because we are automating the process. And secondly, it's I think for us, we have a bit of a, I always say, the unfair advantage, being innovators, being ahead of the curve. So you get extra attention because it's something noble, something new. But time runs out, and you got to go fast. But you need to get the decision makers out there, and fast.
Okay. Tomo, I know you've been selling hardware to businesses for a long time.
Yes.
What's been the biggest challenge in getting business customers to take a new hardware device seriously and put money behind it?
It's a good question. It was every time we are thinking about that, how to explain about our product and customer journey map. But now we can talk about what is our value proposition and what we can solve the problem for the business partners. We have words to explain that currently, but we have no cases. Especially in Japan, our business partners need actual cases in the past.
So is having case studies, is having existing customers sort of the most important aspect of getting new partners?
Yeah, actually we approach it to the many industries, maybe for the 5 years, to find the which market we can fit. And last year we finally found the market. It's an inbound market, tourist market, because our technology don't need to install specific application, just to tap and connect to the web-based services.
Okay.
So app-based service can be fit to the inbound tourist. We finally found last year.
All right. Well, has there been a particular, other than the direct sales approach, has there been other avenues that have been useful in contacting large companies? For example, have you found pitch contests to be useful? Have you found corporate accelerators to be useful? Has there been any other sort of non-standard avenues that are good for startups to make contact?
Yes, as you explained right now, we entered to many pitch contests, and sometimes we get the win. It was very good promotion for us. Our product is just to connect to physical things and physical places with online services. So mainly our target partner is big companies. But we understand it's not easy to knock directly for them. So we use the acceleration program and the pitch contest like a promotion. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, the accelerators pitch contests have been very important in Japan. And Keith, I'm curious, in Singapore, Do startups have the same experience? Are pitch contests and these kind of open innovation programs useful in making corporate sales?
There are lots of opportunities for startups to pitch, same like here in Plug and Play. For us, we started as a coffee shop and then innovated with our technology. So it's only the beginning for us to really start going to pitching competitions, and it's been great exposure for us. But what I can share is the collaboration we have with large organizations. Large organizations, they have many stakeholders, to make approvals, and it takes time. But if you're willing to do a POC for them, right, say, okay, let's work on a use case, let's test it out, let's do it for a month or a week. And then, that helps, because then they can bring the stakeholders along and show it to them and, prove that it works,
This gets back to exactly what Tomo was talking about the importance of having existing customers to point to. So when doing POCs, do you ever do basically free POCs, or are they always paid?
We get them to pay for it.
Yeah. I always hate working for free.
But sometimes we do the free POC. Sometimes.
Have the free POCs turned into real customers more? Or?
Just we want to get new cases, right? So when we want to approach it to the new use cases, we don't need money. Just we want the case, actual case, and with a big brand name.
So the goal of doing the POC with, say, Company X is not necessarily just to sell to Company X. It's to sell to the broader market?
Sorry, let me explain exactly. Okay, we don't charge system usage, but of course, they pay us for the hardware.
And do those proof of concepts, do they later turn into larger accounts, or is the value really that you can take that example and say to other customers, hey, we've worked with this company, the product works in the market?
I think it goes both ways.
Yeah.
You convince that customer, and then that also becomes a use case for other businesses. And I think the more you do, the more examples you have to convince your future customers. So we're definitely happy to do POCs and to support. Yeah.
I think so. It's interesting because it's something that startups need to be really careful about, because I have seen a number of startups who have been far too willing to do free POCs, and they never seem to convert it to real paying clients. But that makes sense. It's a really useful step. As a hardware manufacturer, so quality standards for business, and business hardware in particular, are pretty strict. It's different than trying to sell Internet of Things gadgets. It's different from selling software. How do you demonstrate to corporate clients that your hardware is high enough quality for them to use, either within their own companies or with their customers?
In our case, our product is very simple hardware. So probably we don't have so big advantages only on the hardware side. Our product is not only hardware, but it can work with our software platform. It's important. So our demonstrate is working with our excellent software platform. So maybe we are not 100% hardware-based startup. Half and half.
Okay, so when your customers are concerned and looking over and judging quality, they tend to be more concerned on the software integration side than about the hardware itself?
We believe it's basically software-based.
All right.
I believe. but every company, every partners, at the beginning, they keen to use this very simple user interface on the hardware side.
All right. Keith, what about you? Because you've got an incredibly complex hardware product.
Yes, we do. It's literally running a full-on restaurant with robots in there. It's rather complex and it's expensive.
Well, and you've got robots moving around, boiling water, and
Yeah, just doing the pick and place, like what a barista would do. But it's sometimes they go, oh, how much is that? And we're in hundreds of thousands. And they go, that's way too expensive. But they don't realize if you were to open a restaurant, you're going to spend a few $100,000 as well. So we are nothing less than a restaurant, but with that one upfront payment, and then you have the automation that is going to, bring your bottom line down, the manpower savings. So,
I think this might be a really interesting point that shows how sales in Singapore is different from sales in Japan. So
I would like to learn about that because we want to sell to Japan.
Well, no. I mean, so your main value proposition, or one of the main value propositions, is that you can reduce the cost of running a coffee shop by automating the barista. And most Japanese sales, you have to get through a whole discussion about quality before you even start talking about price.
The quality is assured. All they need is to test it.
How do your customers test it? How do they make sure that the robot's not going to, go crazy and start throwing hot coffee at everybody?
So we do a lot of stress tests. They'll probably invite us for events, and we'll be running it through. And they gauge from the general acceptance of everyone, employees and their customers that they invite. They have thousands of people that come through, and generally, if everyone says, it's good, we like it, so that sets the mood. Yeah.
Okay, so it's demos at trade shows and events and things like that.
Yeah,
so
we should be here actually.
Yeah, I was going to ask.
I was about to get here.
I could use a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So it gets back again to the proof of concept.
We want to make it easier for the larger organizations to say yes. So give them a reason to say yes, and sometimes you need to just go the extra mile just to make it easier for them. Just tick, okay.
What about sourcing? So it seems these days almost all hardware manufacturing is done in China. But Keith, you've got a really complex collection of components besides the basic industrial robots. Where do you source the hardware itself?
Oh, it's, wow. We have from all over the world. The coffee machines are from Switzerland, the best in the market. Robots are made in Taiwan, like Guangta Computers, TechMan. And then you have our IPCs is in Taiwan through Intel's partners, ODM partners. Sensors from everywhere, really. We piece them together.
And so for the robot controller part, where it was actually learning how to make the coffee, was that something that you guys developed internally or that your automation partner, your Taiwanese partner did?
A good thing is we started as a coffee shop, so by default we know how to make a good coffee. Right, so then the robots came in to sort of automate that process that we already know. So robots not making the coffee is doing the pick and place motion, right? The coffee machine is the one that's making coffee, but the ingredients, the recipe is our IP. But it's easy to see the robot as is so heavy on hardware, but 90% of it is the software. The hardware is just 10%. It's the back-end infra that is orchestrating the entire user flow, the mobile app, syncing to the cloud, the payments, the advertising, all that is really the IP stays in the back-end.
So is your IP primarily the integration of the components and the recipe for the coffee itself?
So I always pride ourselves to be very unique because we are a coffee shop, a system integrator, and a software company. So coffee shop, automation specialist, and a software house.
Okay, so I mean, just to clear, so the core IP is in the
software.
The software? Okay. Tomo, I mean, you're saying you're a hardware company, but primarily a software company. Your devices have been inserted into a lot of different kinds of hardware. Are your manufacturing partners here in Japan, or have you mainly moved to China for that?
At the beginning of this business, because we had started working with Shenzhen factory at the beginning. But, and after that, we tried to find another partners in all over Asia. Taipei, Taiwanese factories, but now we are working with a Japanese factory only.
Why?
We have two reasons. The biggest reason is the cost per quantity. Because currently our customer does not order so much quantity. It's very small. for the small quantity, the cost would be high because we have to import. So currently we are working with a Japanese company, but of course we are keeping in touch with those factories in all around Asia.
Well, that's interesting because so it actually was cheaper to manufacture small lots in Japan.
Yes.
That because Japan manufacturing has this reputation for being really, really expensive, and China has a reputation for being really, really cheap. What drove the costs up? Was it just shipping?
Maybe it's because our hardware is so simple mechanism. So Japanese factory, the cost is not so high.
Interesting.
I think without the volumes, the Chinese factories don't want to even take it. They say, sorry, I'm not interested to do a small volume.
Huh. And I mean, you've sourced from all over the world, but it has not. It sounds like it definitely has not been like a low-cost production on.
It's definitely not, but because on a daily basis we have recurring income. We're actually selling coffee, so there's a recurring income from there. So we're not actually that keen in selling just the hardware, but rather have a profit-sharing model.
Okay, well, let's talk about that because it is. I mean, Starbucks has done really well funding growth by selling coffee, but most startups, that's not a practical way of doing it, and they need to go out and look for real venture capital funding. And one thing I've heard again and again from hardware startups is that venture capitalists, VCs, are much more likely, much faster to invest in software companies than they are in hardware companies. And Keith, I'm wondering, has this been your experience as well, and why do you think it is?
Yes, so we're in our fundraising process right now, and a couple of VCs that we've met, they are really, their investment theses or their mandate is really on software-based startups. So the minute they know we have hardware, they go, no, it's too heavy. And they're not interested.
Have they, for example, does their fund not allow them to invest in anything but software, or they just think hardware is too risky? Or
I think it's just the mandate, the way the fund is structured, to invest in software companies. But that means there's an opportunity. So VCs out there, listen, there's an opportunity, there's a gap, there's a funding gap for companies like us, where we are really solving real-world problems with automation and software. You can't eliminate the hardware component because we're actually producing something, a physical product. It's not an online kind of product. It is a physical product where you need machinery, you need hardware.
And the VCs you've been talking to, have they been mainly Singapore-based VCs?
I wish I could have met a lot more. Never too many. Based in Singapore, right. But they are with offices around the world. But I would like to meet some VCs out of Japan, actually.
Right. Tomo, you've raised funds here in Japan from VCs.
Yeah.
Do you think VCs are less likely to invest in hardware?
It's a very interesting question for me. The answer from what they are investing for, hardware or software or team or founders or other something, I don't know. But in our case, probably for the VC, they're thinking about our company is software-based company.
Ah, okay.
They recognize. So, of course, we don't explain about our hardware side story so much.
Okay, so
every time I talk only, software side and our experiences and my mission and vision,
So you explain we're basically a software company and we have this little hardware thing we do on the side.
Yes.
All right. So you've explained that you're really not a hardware company at all. You're a software company.
Yes. The founders, can make that story, how to explain our business, right?
And then the VCs have been a lot more receptive.
Yes.
All right. Well, Keith, do you think that's something that would work? I mean, you guys are your hardware is so cool and so front and center, but your IP is software.
That's right. So my pitch is we're 90% software, 10% hardware. We can't deny there will be a hardware because we're really producing a product. But, it's a learning journey. We're talking to VCs, and every time we talk to them, we learn about their thought process and what they're thinking. But for us, we need to meet the right VC that could see this future, this vision, and once, they'll be the right ones.
Well, I mean, software companies, when VCs ask what they're going to use the money for, it's always, we're going to hire more engineers and we're going to hire more marketers. It's really simple. But as a hardware company, like Tomo, are you raising funds right now?
Currently, of course, we are opening every time.
Okay. When you get venture funds or the next round, what is the primary use of funds? Is it software developers and marketing, or is it hardware expenses?
Software development and business development.
So really, it is a software company profile?
Yes.
All right. Keith, what about you?
We need talent acquisition. We need data scientists, crunch all our data, build up the whole data structure. And engineers, they don't come that easily, especially in Singapore. Everyone wants a data scientist. They're in high demand. And for us, as a startup, to hire the best people, it was a challenge. But now that we got some traction, you get people who are interested and they see the vision.
Makes sense. And actually, we talked about hiring, business development and hiring marketers. Let's talk a bit about scaling up, because scaling a hardware company is a whole lot harder than scaling a software company. I mean, writing software that supports 10 people is not all that different from writing software that supports 1,000, and software that supports 1,000 is not that different from software that supports 1,000,000. But the difference between manufacturing 10 units is really different from 1,000, which is really different from like 1,000,000. It's almost like reinventing the company. So, Tomo, what are your thoughts on scaling?
We don't want to sell hardware. In our case, our device is so expensive, so we want to distribute freely, totally free. We want to get the revenue from software side. We don't have to expect hardware sales, but getting money from a customer experience-based new ecosystem. So it's like a software-based company, I think.
Okay. And Keith, if you're moving from one or two proof of concept robots to thousands or tens of thousands of these robots around the world, what would you have to change about your company to make that happen?
It's a good problem to have, isn't it?
It would be.
It's a lot of business. I'll be quite happy to have that. We will start with contract manufacturing, because a lot of the components are already pre-made. We just order from the factory, but we need to piece them together, integrate them. So that can be done really by contract manufacturers. We'll work with them, and we'll primarily focus on the software and building the business. Yeah.
Okay. So it sounds really like both of your long-term strategy is to make the hardware manufacturer somebody else's problem, to outsource that and focus on the software.
Give them some business.
Yeah. Okay. Listen, I'm going to have one more question for these guys, and it's an important one, but I want to remind you, please send any questions you want me to ask them to the slido.com, like the QR code, and I'll ask them on your behalf. But to kind of wrap it up, I want to ask, where does this all end? I mean, hardware startup IPOs are relatively rare compared to software, and I think that's because growth tends to be a little slower. And I'm curious, do you think, looking into your own crystal ball, do you think the most likely exit for your company is going to be an IPO? Do you figure you're going to be acquired by another company? And what do you think would be the most likely industry that would be interested in acquiring a company like yours? Keith, what are your thoughts?
Initially, long ago, I thought Starbucks would buy me out because we were going to be a big threat to them. But I'm sure they're looking at different options as well. But as I started this journey, I realized it's really more than just coffee. We're building a technology that can be repurposed for food, for, the food industry. And then I realized that company is worth a lot more than that. Definitely IPO for me. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Tomo, what are your thoughts?
I think it's not based on the industry side, but what I want to do as a founder and CEO, right? It's quite difficult to answer as a founder and CEO because as a founder, of course, M&A, acquisition by other companies, it's not our scope, of course, because I'm a founder.
All right.
But from as CEO, I don't deny any kind of possibilities, even firing myself.
Okay, guys. Well, listen, I want to open this up to the questions we've got coming in from the audience. And there's a really good one that I want to ask both of you. It's like, so do you ever regret starting a company? Keith, what are your thoughts on that?
Never. It's the best thing I've ever done.
Really?
Absolutely.
Oh,
Absolutely. No two ways about it.
that's amazing. I've started a number of them, and there are always days that I regret it. But long term, when you're looking back, you never regret it. But there are days that are always rough.
Regret for not doing it better, but never regret for doing it.
Never regret for starting it.
Yeah.
Tomo,
Right.
what about you? Are there days where you kind of wish I'd never started this company, or
Nothing.
nothing?
No regret. Of
No
course.
regrets. All right,
Yes.
fantastic.
Because I'm doing every day, I'm doing just what I want to do.
All right. Well, and you've been doing it for a long time, since '95, in different
Yes.
startups. Okay.
I'm veteran on internet.
All right, Keith. I think this one's more for you. Why Japan? Why focus on Japan?
I think Japan does have similar pain points as in Singapore with manpower, labor shortage. I believe even 7-Eleven's facing the labor shortage, and they're trying to reduce the number of hours they're open. And Japanese are very forward-looking. They embrace technology, so it's a good market for us for sure.
All right. So Tomo, you never regret starting a company, but what are the things that you still worry about day to day?
Fundraising.
Yeah, that's part of startup
It's a
life.
lure- It's a lure of my voice.
You're almost always raising funding for
Yes.
something. Keith, what about you? What keeps you up at night?
Obviously fundraising, but that is something that you can't change. You just got to do a great job, and hopefully through the power of the universe, someone will spot us. Right? But really, what's within my control will be that if we stop innovating. If we stop innovating, that is the end. And if we stop attracting talents to join us for this mission, then we'll go nowhere.
I think it's interesting both of you mentioned fundraising, and it makes sense because that's something that's really kind of front and center for all startups. But I'm curious about something like attracting the right employees or hiring the right people, which is something I've always found, I end up spending a huge amount of my time focused on and trying to do. Has that been relatively easy for you, or is that also something that is kind of a headache and concern?
For us to make that leap into technology from a coffee shop was a big one. To hire that first group of engineers, how do you even write that job description? So I want to hire you. And when you're telling them this vision, do they trust that you know what you're saying? It was hard, the beginning. It's down to the mindset of the employee, the mindset, You got to have positive people, because we're creating things that are not yet sort of realized. You got to have a lot of belief, a lot of faith in what they're doing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tomo, what about you? Do you spend a lot of your time as CEO recruiting employees, trying to find the right people?
Yes, of course. Not so many times, but I use a lot of time to hiring and how to valorize our missions and product values and everything to hire them. In my case, it's very strange because my parents both had their own company, so founder and founder.
All right.
So they welcome my own business.
Were your parents actually encouraging you to start a company?
Yes.
Really?
So they celebrated when I quit the last company, Recruit. Yeah.
Right, which
they celebrated. Wow, congratulations to graduate Recruit.
That's really unusual in 1992 or 1995.
Right, yeah.
Most parents would be horrified if their children quit Recruit.
So in my case, no family blogs.
Let's talk about going global a bit. Keith, you mentioned before that Japan is a really big market, an attractive market. Are you focused on other countries besides Japan, or is Japan like your first target?
Absolutely. We've scaled in Singapore, to gain all the experience, because you need a lot of experience running through the supply chain, topping up and having the systems running 24/7. Japan is strategic for us because we have a partner here we're working with. We're coming to the Tokyo Olympics. Our robot's going to be there serving coffee, and it just makes sense to be here. But our solution really could be everywhere. We've got inquiries from around the world.
Okay, so far you've got customers and proof of concepts in Singapore. You've got a up-and-coming proof of concept or customer here in Japan.
Yes, in Japan. We've done shows in Australia.
All right.
Coffee's huge in Australia, so definitely going to be there.
Tomo, you've been focused on Japan. Have you done sales? No, you have done some sales out of Japan,
we
haven't
don't
you?
focus on only in Japan. So we think every time, not domestic first, but global first. And we have approached to the global market from maybe 6 or 7 years ago. Finally, we found the market in Japan, so now we are approaching to Japan. But in the past, we have approached at the beginning to the global market first.
Well, what's the logic there? Because I understand, like Keith was saying, like Singapore is not a big market. You're forced to look outside of Singapore from the very beginning. But Japan is a big market. So
everybody says so.
Yeah,
So a lot of startups says, we want to go global after domestic, because our domestic market is so big.
So why did you go global first?
Because our product is brand new in the global market. So I believe we can
Get
fight.
more traction.
Yes.
More traction from outside and then come back into Japan.
Right, we have confidence in about that. But if I copied some technology from overseas to Japan, maybe we do the business only in Japan because we cannot fight with them in other countries because we have copied.
So what was the first country that you really got traction in?
5 years ago, our first exhibition was in Hong Kong, the Asia and Europe, not North America.
It is interesting because I think that particularly for global B2B startups and Asian hardware startups are very focused on Japan as like the main export market because of its size. But more and more Japanese founders are telling me that they'll exhibit at CES and focus heavily on the outside markets rather than Japan. Okay, well, listen, guys, I want to thank you for sitting down with me today, and let's please give them both a huge round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And thank you very much.
And we're back. I think one of the most surprising things I learned from this interview was the way in which both of these companies were dealing with the challenges of raising money and scaling as hardware startups. Basically, both of them took the same approach, which is insisting that they are not actually hardware startups at all, but rather software startups, and explaining that the value is in the IP and that they plan on outsourcing all manufacturing. Now, it's easier to understand Tomo's position on this. They're using standard, inexpensive NFC chips, and their customers consider the hardware itself to be disposable, and the value is the data and the analysis. So it makes sense that Aquabit Spirals is run as a software company and treated as a software company. Keith's position that Crown Digital is a software company, while perhaps correct, is not as obvious. With their robot barista, the hardware is expensive, and the integration of the components requires considerable expertise. Of course, At scale, they might be able to outsource production, and they certainly have IP in the controlling software and the recipes. But I think it's going to be a challenge to get investors and partners to not think of them as fundamentally being a hardware company. But I thought the most interesting and counterintuitive experience that both shared was that of going global. Now, the standard advice about global expansion, and this is the advice I always give, is that you should find product market fit in your home market, build an initial customer base there, and then think about global expansion. Both Tomo and Keith found this advice to be wanting, and they found initial adoption overseas first, with Tomo re-importing the innovation back to Japan. So, why is this? I doubt there's anything hardware-specific in their experiences. Perhaps it's simply a numbers game. I mean, more markets means more potential customers, and a greater chance that someone will need exactly what you've created. But the sales process is much harder away from your home market. But maybe, particularly if you're doing something that is genuinely innovative, being from a different country and a different market means that potential customers are more likely to assume that you're taking a new and different approach. You'll have to work harder to convince them that you understand their market, of course. But perhaps being from somewhere else makes people more understanding of why you want to do things differently. If you want to talk about innovation in hardware or software for that matter, Tomo, Keith, and I would love to hear from you. So come by disruptingjapan.com/show152 and let's talk about it. If you leave a comment, I guarantee you that Keith, Tomo, or I, or maybe all of us will respond. And hey, if you get the chance, check us out on LinkedIn or Facebook or even Twitter. But even better, if you like the show, tell people about it. Have a good old-fashioned analog conversation. The real reason Disrupting Japan continues to grow is not social media marketing. It's because listeners like you tell people about it. But most of all, thanks for listening. And thank you for letting people interested in Japanese startups know about the show. I'm Tim Romero, and thanks for listening to Disrupting Japan.